On October 31st, Halloween that would be, of course, unless you don't celebrate it, Medler had some quick gameplay thoughts that kind of talked about the preseason and stuff, so that's what I'm going to talk about in today's video. I'm just going to kind of read over the post like bit by bit, and then we can discuss it in the comment section down below. So of course, if you like this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, hit that bell notification, and here we go. The post reads like this. Hi folks, usual disclaimer. These posts will often contain talk about future work we're doing or planning on doing that isn't very yet guaranteed to ship. The nature of the work could change, or depending on what we discover, projects mentioned can get delayed or even stopped. If you'd like to see a tweet whenever a new one of these goes up, there's a link to Riot Medler's Twitter. And it starts like this. A bit more preseason 8.23 context. Preseason's getting pretty close now. We've talked about the larger changes a fair bit. Most recent update at the link below in case you missed it. Wanted to run through some detail on a few additional changes as well though, like for example, jungle experience. Like they always change the jungle and like every year in the preseason, which is probably like a less risky time to change the jungle, to be fair. But that being said, changes to the jungler earlier this year, including the removal of the over-leveled XP penalty, meant junglers are often getting quite a bit more XP than they were previously, which can include them being the highest and highest equal level on their team, a bit more than we believe is appropriate. We're cutting the amount of jungle XP scales over the time back slightly as a result. Change we're testing involves camps giving the same amount of XP at game start, but scaling 5% slower over time. Value of dragons. We're bumping up the value of taking a bit. That's what it says. Okay. Since at present it's not been proving as much to be a priority as intended early game. Current tactics in testing are that we are having the first stack of each buff give more benefit than the following one. So for example, Cloud Drake at 3%, 5.5 or 4.5%, 6% versus 2, 4, and 6%. And increasing gold XP a bit, so trade-off versus taking regular camps isn't necessarily punishing. Spear of Shojin, which might be very good for bruiser champions who, like fighter champions, were going to get items. If you didn't remember, back in 8.12, they kind of delayed those, pushed them to the preseason. Well, it's now the preseason, time for the Spear of Shojin to return. We're testing some modifications to Spear of Shojin with an eye to bringing it out in the preseason. For anyone unfamiliar, it's an item we had in the PvE around the mid-season that gave AD health and defenses based on your AD. Versions we're currently looking at involve changing from flat DR to damage DR, less abusive in certain cases, much clearer interactions with pen, and build path changes. Not currently planning on releasing Atma's Reckoning, which was the other item in the PvE planned for the mid-season, about 8.12. Possible we end up merging some elements of it though, some of its build path perhaps, with the changes to the spear though. So basically, Atma's Reckoning probably won't be coming to the PvE after all, but what they might do is kind of combine both of the items into the Spear of Shojin. So you're still kind of getting them both. If I remember correctly, one of the contexts was that there was some overlay between what Atma does, maybe like let's say if you want a Sterix Gauge. So basically you kind of be taking up 2 item slots with items that kind of did the same thing, and instead they want you to free up that slot for bruisers and stuff, so that way you can build the Spear of Shojin, have some of the benefits from Atma's Reckoning, and then still be able to build some of those other items as well. So there's that. Control wards. We're planning on decreasing the number of control wards that can be carried at once from 2 to its current 3. That's targeted at play where they're being used most like consumable red trinket charges despite the cost, providing unintended amounts of vision denial. We're not trying to remove that entirely, but we do want to increase opportunity cost of doing so somewhat, hence the lower cap. And then Fleet Footwork's AP ratio. We're testing a reduction to Fleet Footwork's AP ratio at present. That's not driven by a desire to push AP users off Fleet Footwork, but instead due to the decoupling of stacks from choices of the rune tree. We've kept Fleet Footwork's AP ratio high until now because the cost of going into precision for many AP champions was quite high, given that they usually don't get as much benefit from attack speed. Now that you'll be able to choose your stats, on the other hand, the tree's quite a bit more accessible to them, so pushing AP ratios far above where it would normally be isn't as much needed. Again, context, basically, before, because stats were linked to the trees you would take, if you were like Victor going for the AP ratio, back when like kind of like the tanky AP like Fleet Footwork Victor build emerged, you still had like a drawback of getting attack speed because you went into precision, and so as well with other AP champions. So what they're deciding to do is being like, hey, well now the stats are separated, the risk isn't as high, the AP ratio doesn't need to be as high anymore, because then you could just get those AP stats in the stat tree now. So there's that. Doesn't mean you can't not use it still, like Kassadin, Victor, and people like that. It does mean it might be slightly less appealing though, regardless, just because a nerf is a nerf after all. But you know. 822. We're trying a few tweaks right now as we come to the end of the 822 development window. A bit of context on some of those below. Maokai, considering a few different buffs aimed primarily at buffing his jungling, given he's performing quite a bit weaker there than in lane. Nunu has never quite performed as well as we expected him to post update, even with optimal builds. Looks like we're a bit off in terms of how much power he'd get from learning curve, giving him a bit more mid-combat durability in particular as a result, with a strong heal when he uses his Q on champions. Taliyah, testing a change where Q deals reduced damage to monsters, but has a lower CD and mana cost. Somewhat experimental, so might not ship. Taliyah jungle is performing too well in high tier play, both solo queue and pro. Mid lane performance by contrast isn't out of line, so looking at solutions that target primarily jungle. Trundle, we hit him too hard with the previous nerfs, putting some damage back in both base and ratio as a result. Victor, as we've kind of mentioned earlier a little bit, and he's kind of running away in the top lane right now, so how about that? After some investigation, we're probably going to take a bit of power out of tank Victor builds while aiming to keep AP Victor around his current power level. Still down to see some top lane Victor, starting to see it perform really well when tanky, even though a lot of players doing it aren't that experienced yet. Trying to tone it down as a result without going so far as to remove it from being a good choice at least some of the time. So real quick, we'll just run over context that we maybe quite didn't with the jungle XP. You know, there's a whole complaint that if a jungler ganks your lane and they get a kill on you, like within like 6 minutes, you might be losing your tower, especially bot lane without the fortification, but even in the other lanes once that wears off. So maybe this will trim some power off the jungler, so that way that strat might still exist, but it won't be as, you know, deadly, especially with the changes coming to towers in the preseason. We kind of already went over like Spiritogen, and Control Ward kind of explains itself. Fleet Footwork kind of explains itself. When it comes to the champions, of course, top lane Victor, again, as we mentioned, is a thing. I think whatever changes they're planning on doing, coupled with the AP Fleet Footwork changes, might be enough to tone them down, but not obviously eliminate the playstyle, since they love preserving playstyles. Isn't that right, bot lane mages that are still struggling to survive right now against my AD carry role? Thank you, Riot. With that being said, jokes aside, Taliyah's an interesting one to see on here because like we haven't seen her in the mid lane quite some time. Apparently she's fine, but in the jungler she's just stronger. So maybe she's gonna be like Vi eventually, where Vi was originally supposed to be a top laner that became a jungler, for those that don't know. So there's that too. And obviously these changes aren't necessarily guaranteed. Obviously they might not ship. Things can change, of course. It's just context, and this was October 31st. We'll see when a new gameplay updates come, probably like Monday. So that's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that bell notification as always, but I don't know which video will be next, because life can have a lot of kinks. So until this time, take care. GG, get jinxed. Thank you for watching, and enjoy pizza responsibly.